Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat, and with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Welcome, listeners from America and across the world. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio, and I thank all of you for taking the time to join us this evening. I'm honored to have as guest Dr. Preston Bailey. Dr. Bailey, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Well, I thank you for your willingness to come on and to join us in show, and I'm definitely looking forward to speaking with you about all of your incredible research and the books that you've written and the counseling that you've done. If you would, Dr. Bailey, please share with the listening audience your information, your website, also your book, and a little bit about it.
Yes. I was a pastor for 43 years, and I retired a few years ago. And through all those years, I've counseled, and now I mainly counsel. And I usually counsel people who are coming out of the Illuminati. The Illuminati is one of the 13 bloodlines of the families of an ancient family. And my website, where you can find out information of what I talk about, is spiritualwarfarecenter.com. That's spiritual warfare, CENTER.com. And I'm also a coach with bridemovement.com, Bride Ministries, that counsels people with DID or spiritual warfare issues. That's bridemovement.com. And so since 1983, I've been counseling people who were abused as a child. I used to be the chairman of the Governor's Task Force on Child Abuse. So in 1983, dissociative identity disorder was recognized by the American Psychiatric Association as a mental disorder from trauma and abuse as a child. So what happens is SRA-DID means dissociative identity disorder caused by satanic ritual abuse. So that means they traumatized and abused this child and programmed them to create what's called altered personalities that the person may not remember whatever they do. You can study recent history, the last 30 years, of famous murderers or serial murderers who don't remember them shooting the person that they assassinated. And that's characteristic of mind control programming. So that's predominantly what I do now.
Well, this is a fascinating area of research, and especially now with all of the Pizzagate and the leaked emails and the interest that has been placed upon the satanic ritual abuse and the links to the different politicians, the elites, and that this is nothing new. It's been going on for a very long time. It's been reported by individuals like Senator John DeCamp in speaking about the Franklin cover-up and things of that nature. And he was one of the first to even point the finger at the Catholic priests and the cover-up. And we see even now, just recently, where they spoken about 300 plus priests that were protected by the church and moved to different areas by the Roman Catholic Church, and that this kind of thing has been perpetuated, and that they paid off even family members for a very long time that were abused and victimized by these Catholic priests. And so, would you speak about that, and also the Pizzagate, and also the Franklin cover-up? Just if you would comment on those two things.
Yes, this has gone on for hundreds of years, where Roman Catholic priests, government officials, or other leaders in the community, usually those that are wealthy, are involved in molesting and abusing children. The reason that occurs is people that abuse others. 80% of child molesters were molested when they were a child, so they're acting out what happened to them. And I saw this throughout the years over and over again. As chairman of the Governor's Task Force on Child Abuse, I would find people who molested children. The problem is children get very scared, and they know that their abuser, their perpetrator, is taller, bigger, and stronger than them. So they usually don't say anything. Even social workers I've found that are trained in interviewing children who were abused, social workers think that their children will tell them if someone tried to hurt them, and that's not usually the case. The vast majority of the time, even the children of social workers that are molested do not even tell their own parent who's a social worker. That's just the nature of children. Children are threatened to keep things secret. Sometimes they say, the child says, I put that information in my pocket and I don't let it out. A typical person who molests a child, they threaten to hurt the child, or they threaten to kill the mother of the child or a sibling, and that's what usually happens. I'm horrified that when I read in the news that a child is molested, like the number one molester of a child is a stepfather. The number two is a father. The number three is a close relative of the child. And number four is a neighbor. So it's people that have regular contact with the child. And of course, a priest, a Roman Catholic priest, has regular contact with the child. And I've counseled people who were molested as a child by a Roman Catholic priest, and there's nothing more heart-wrenching than hearing the parts of the child that were created to deal with this trauma and abuse, and they relive, even though they're an adult, they relive the experience as if it just happened an hour ago. And it's really horrible. So Pizzagate is just a modern terminology for a place where it is arranged for children to be molested. But let me say this. If there is a term used to describe a phenomenon, then you know it is a serious problem. In Washington, D.C., where government workers are, the Senate and the Congress, in Washington, D.C., there is a term called chicken hawking. Now, a chicken hawk is a bird that kills the infants of other birds, and they steal the baby chicks of other birds, and they kill it and eat it. And so chicken hawking is when adults go and pick up children during their lunch hour and molest the child. And sometimes the child has what is usually referred to as a pimp. In Pizzagate, it's just a restaurant, but it's somebody who acts as a pimp and for money arranges sex with these children. And we live now in a day and time where sex trafficking is found all over the world, even in the United States, especially in major cities. And so it's a very serious problem. And unfortunately, people in government are involved in molesting children, and they do this usually their whole adult life until they die. I spoke in Minnesota years ago, and many dissociative identity disorder counselors, I was there for the week training the counselors, and usually the very tough cases of people that they counsel with extreme dissociative disorders, they bring them to me for me to counsel them during lunch or any break or in the evening. And while I was there, I met three women who all three, they did not know each other. They were from different states to come to this conference. And all three of them knew a well-respected Democratic senator. And when these women were children, he had molested all three of them. And they described certain marks on his body that would not be generally known. And so that's how bad it has become in our society. And it seems like people in government it's overlooked whenever they commit horrible crimes against children.
It's a horrible thing, and for the especially for those that have never looked into this kind of thing and don't believe that there's anything to Pizzagate. Can you share some examples? And of course, no names or anything like that, but just kind of a general story. Even like with, there's the Hampstead children that recently came out, and they accused their father of even having them involved in satanic ritual abuse, where they were involved in the sacrifice of babies, and how these two children were being basically pimped out by their dad and were molested by even their school principals and teachers, and that this was just a common, even everyday occurrence for them, and they just did not know different and thought that this was a normal kind of thing. So can you talk of any, any particulars just to share some details?
Yeah, in the Franklin cover up, I actually talked to one of the mothers, and even young boys are kidnapped to be molested by some pervert, some sociopathic pervert, and in the Martin daycare center in California years ago, it was the longest running criminal case in the history of California. I talked to one of the parents of a child that was molested in the daycare center, and I even talked to the prosecuting attorney. In a lot of cases, the problem is convincing a jury that this person molested the child. Mm-hmm. In one case, a man, the father of a child, kept molesting his daughter, and she was 7 years old, and she had enough smarts. She had Skype, which we are talking on right now, and she hit record so that it would record her in her bed, and it showed the back of her father and the arm. A woman who is a scientist on the blood vessels of an arm shows that it's like a fingerprint. It's very unique to each individual. And she showed in court irrefutable scientific evidence that he had molested his daughter, even though you could not see his face. And the jury found the father not guilty of molesting the child, even though this has happened over and over again. And even though the child had enough sense to record it on Skype. And when the jury was asked after the court, they said, we didn't have any trouble with the scientific evidence of the veins in the arm of the person. We just didn't believe the child. The child didn't seem believable enough. I mean, that's horrible. I'll tell you another case that just infuriates me. 2 days ago, the mother called me, and I'll tell you the case. The father had left the mother, and when he left, she was pregnant, and so the child was born. And so for like 5-6 years, he didn't even have contact with his wife or his daughter. So the mother filed for divorce, which is normal. I mean, he hadn't been there for 5-6 years. Well, when he received the divorce papers and saw that he had a little girl, he fought the divorce, and he sued for custody of his daughter, who is now by this time 7 years old. So three different therapists interviewed this child, and the child said over and over again, very clearly, that their father, when he got visitation every other week, that he would molest this 7-year-old child. Well, here's what the psychotic judge ruled. And if I had his name, I would say it on air. That psychotic judge said that all three therapists of the child was wrong that the father had not molested the child. The police are not usually trained very well in cases of child abuse. For example, of all the professions in the United States, the number one profession that commits adultery is a police officer in America.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you think about that? So,
Yeah.
And a number of times, prostitutes on the street, they push themselves on a policeman, and if he has unresolved conflict from his childhood, won't think anything of using a prostitute or whatever. There's even cases where policemen pull a woman over for a traffic offense and rapes her or blackmails her into sex. Well, the policeman said to the judge, now remember, they're not very well trained in investigating cases of child abuse. A police officer is not a trained counseling professional, not at all. So, in fact, through the years of many cases of child abuse, now not every time, but the vast majority of the time, the police officers had been a hindrance to the solving of the case of child abuse.
Right.
And I hate to say that because I used to be great supporters of police officers, but the last 10 years, I've just seen so many cases through the years where police officers hinder an actual case of a child being molested by the father or stepfather. And so the judge ordered the mother not to have therapists talk to this child anymore. And they insisted on visitation of the father with the child for every other week.
Oh my
and
gosh.
so what does he do every other week? Every other week he molests the child. Now, I'll tell you who should be thrown in jail. That evil, dysfunctional judge.
Right.
And I've known that many times through the years. The judge is grossly incompetent, and there needs to be a clear system in America that if a judge fails in his task, that he ought to be thrown in jail along with the child molester. And
Absolutely.
so is that a personal enough case for you that got me going
Yes.
there?
Yes.
This is just this week.
It's sad because it's unfortunate because, as you said, we see case after case after case where the judge or the lawyer or attorney or the police officers, just like in the Franklin cover-up, you even had high-level politicians being fingered and names, industrialists, entrepreneurs being named by these children, and then the FBI comes and gets involved and is trying to protect the politicians. And so we see how the children are harassed, and they are the ones to be made like they are crazy and they're making all of this up. The same thing happened in the Hampstead case. And it seems to be that, they have secret society connections, these fraternity Masonic orders, and that they
That's
are
correct. Yes.
Yeah. Can you speak on that just a little?
Well, let me simplify. People call this a conspiracy theory. Now, let me just say this. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy fact.
Right.
I counsel people almost every day of the year, except for Christmas. That's because I unplugged my phone. I counsel people who are coming out of the Illuminati or one of the major secret societies. And people need to put this clearly in their mind. The Illuminati, the Freemasons, and the Vatican of Roman Catholicism. Now, notice I specified that they're all three intertwined. They may have separate leadership, but they are all three intertwined. And so you will find all three organizations that in a premeditative fashion, they actually, in an organized fashion, molest children. Now, think of it this way, and many young women out there today, she wants to marry a handsome, nice, rich guy, and that's what they think. That's their dream. That's their ideal of romance. What they don't understand is rich men that are handsome, even though they're married, they're hit on every day by attractive women. And so they have had years of, there's no nice way of saying it, they've had years of having sex with all of these gorgeous women. So after a while, normal sex is boring for them. Mm-hmm. So what they do is they are into kinky sex. They're into sodomy. They're into molesting children. Even in Hollywood, there have actually been famous actors who have molested children, but you don't hear about it in the evening news. I know who they are. In fact, one famous actor was on many television shows in which, in one famous movie, he was a principal, and in another movie, he was on a family movie, and he is actually convicted of making child pornography. What do you think of that?
Does not at all surprise me. And I think that this is more prevalent than the public has any idea that this kind of thing is going on all over the place. And it's sad. Well, they were, I was just going to say that even, I forget, but anyways, he was talking about how they even do snuff films,
yes,
where the
right.
children is killed at the end, and then these tapes are sold underground to these people that are involved in and perpetuating these kind of crimes.
And that's correct. So let me answer your question about Freemasons molesting children. Now, I've talked to a lot of Masons. My father, before he died, was a member of the Masonic Lodge. My stepfather was a member of the Masonic Lodge, and they just joined it, as most people, as a good old boys club. That's what they do. But it is the 33rd degree Mason and higher that things change totally. I'm counseling a woman now, and she was sexually abused in her life worse than anybody I have ever counseled in 43 years. Now, that is really bad. So let me tell you about her case. her father was a member of the Masonic Lodge. And by the way, this has been documented since she was a child, and in her adulthood, every counselor she's talked to, this has shown over and over again to be true. Her medical records show this is true. When a man molests a child, they cause physical problems in that child. And that is the evidence that a prosecuting attorney wants to show in court. And so by law, in all 50 states, when a child is injured and they're taken to a doctor or hospital, by law, they have 24 hours to report a suspected case of child abuse. School teachers or any school officials are also required by law to report any suspected cases of child abuse. Now, that a school official may not be qualified or trained in diagnosing child abuse. That's why they're to report it and let people who are experts or specialists in this to talk to the child. And years ago, I was on the state task force, and I said that court is an adult experience, not a child's experience. So their testimony should be allowed to be videotaped and is admissible in evidence in court. Well, it went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court agreed with me that, yes, a child's testimony can be admissible on videotape in a court of law. Now, so anyway, this girl, when she was 8 years old, she was taken by her father to his local Masonic lodge. And this girl was tied to a low table. She was tied, her hands and her legs were tied to the forelegs of the low-lying table. And each of these dirty old perverts in that Masonic lodge took turns and molested her. Every one of them. Now, when a child is traumatized or abused, what happens is the five senses of that child are, it's called a hypervigilant state, is so heightened that the brain records all the five senses, so they can describe for you years later in detail the people that were there. They can describe the smell in the room, and all their five senses, they can describe it in detail. It is like a recorder. It's permanently recorded in the brain. And if people don't mess up that recording, then that is pure unadulterated evidence. So this, I have had probably close to over 100 children that I've counseled as adults that were molested in a Masonic lodge. Now, they can, lodge members can say whatever they want to, but all of these people do not know each other. And they describe exactly what the lodge looks like, the rituals and everything else in there. And this is horrible that it goes on in America. Now, I'm not saying that every Mason is a child molester. I'm not saying that. I'm saying at a certain level that they worship Lucifer and they're involved in molesting children. Now, you've already talked about these 300 Roman Catholic priests who molested a child. Now, in the Vatican is a separate state. It's a separate country, and it goes by different laws. But there's been a number of times where the Italian police entered the Vatican and arrested priests there at the Vatican for molesting children. And there's two main reasons why these adult perverts will molest a child. Number one, it's easier to scare a child and tell them not to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, they do it because they're normally insecure wimps without a backbone. They're not real men. They are wussies. So they molest a child because they have a sense of power and control over the child. Well, that's a wimp's way out. That's no real control at all. It is the ultimate evil bully to molest a child who cannot defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the Illuminati, they do the same thing. In fact, in rituals, they tie a child to the altar and they take turns molesting the child. And in satanic cults, which is different than the Illuminati, the word Illuminati means the enlightened ones. Lucifer means the bright one. So the Illuminati worships Lucifer. Satanists are different. Now, Christians are correct when they say Lucifer and Satan is the same person. Yes, but they would actually, if they were at a ritual, Lucifer would appear in a different form than would Satan. I know that sounds strange for most Christians listening, but Lucifer appears in the form of what's called the Baphomet. That's a French word. It's the goat's head, the large hairy chest of a man, and the hoofen feet of a goat. And the head is where the pentagram comes from. The two ears, the two horns, and the chin or the goatee, so that's 5. So the pentagram means 5, and that's where the goat's head comes from, the pentagram. So whenever they have a ritual, they draw a pentagram on the altar, and they perform rituals around the altar or ceremonies. So what they often do as a part of their ritual, they molest the child. Now, let me say this. Every city I've ever lived in, from the day I was born, they have satanic cults in that city, even if it's in a rural area, a country area. And I remember I used to pastor in a small town population 720. And those church-going people would think there was no satanic cult in that little hick town. But I remember one morning at 2 o'clock, the sheriff called me. He said, Dr. Bailey, I want you to come down to my office. And I said, why? He woke me up. He said, I have a girl that's demon possessed. I said, how do you know? Now, this is the sheriff. And he said, look, just believe me, she's demon possessed. And so I threw my clothes on. I went down to the sheriff's office. I walked in his office, and he was right. This girl was demon possessed. She had been molested at the local rural satanic cult meeting. She managed to escape miraculously. She was actually in a Free Will Baptist Church's deacon's daughter. And
Oh my gosh.
she somehow managed to escape. But during this ritual, they have what's called demon calling rituals and revelations, where demons are summoned to enter the body of this child.
Oh my God.
It's really horrible. So therefore, to deal with dissociative identity disorder caused by satanic ritual abuse, you almost always see demons involved in the person. And that's the reason. Now, how did I learn so much about Satanism and witchcraft and stuff? Well, let me tell you. Because I was never scared of these people. I was never scared of demons because I believe what the Bible said about demons. That when Jesus died on the cross 2,000 years ago, he disarmed, Colossians 2:15. He disarmed Satan and all of the forces of evil. So they don't have any weapons. But I led a lot of witches and Satanists to Christ, and almost every day I counsel people coming out of the Illuminati. And my faith and the belief in God only strengthened counseling these tormented souls. Because when sin abounds, the grace of God does much more abound, as the Bible teaches.
Mhm.
But I'll never forget, one year I led the head Satanist in the county to Christ. And
Wow.
I'll never forget what he said after he accepted Christ. And I baptized him that night at church. He said, does that mean I cannot meet with my 300 witches on Halloween? I said, yes, that's right. The 300 witches that worship Satan and cast spells was what he was under his control.
Wow.
Now, that's serious stuff, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I was just going to ask you if you would elaborate a little bit on that as well.
okay, I'll be glad to. What happened is, one Sunday I was preaching on the power of God was greater than the power of Satan. And one of the women in the church brought this real tall guy with long hair, dressed in all black. And I would say the power of God is far greater than the power of Satan. And he was up in the balcony sitting with this girl. And every time he would shake his head like this, no, no, no. And you could hear it mumbling under his breath. He would say, no, no, no. So that just egged me on. And a few more minutes later, I would say, the power of Christ is greater than the power of Satan. He would shake his head, no, no, no. And I just kept it up the whole sermon. I'm a glutton for punishment. So after the service, school teachers and people in the community came up to me, preacher, did you know that the head Satanist in the city was here today at church? And I go, no, but I kind of figured that. So the girl's father owned a garbage collection company, and he had huge biceps. He was bald as a cue ball, but he was real strong. He had huge biceps. So after church, I grabbed him and I said, your daughter brought the head Satanist in this city to church today. He said, really? I said, yes. I said, I tell you what I want you to do. I said, this afternoon at 3 o'clock, I want you to bring him to my house. And he said, how am I supposed to do that? I said, that's not my problem. I said, that's your problem. I said, let me see your arm. So he flexed his bicep. I said, I'm telling you again, that is your problem. I don't care how you do it. I don't care if you have to Shanghai him and throw him in your trunk. I want you to get him at my house at 3 o'clock. So sure enough, at 3 o'clock, he dropped off this guy, and he wanted to make sure that I knew that that garbage man brought this Satanist to my house exactly at 3. And I said to him, thank you very much. And so here's what I told him. I had several people already in my house praying for me, and we bound the demons that were in him. So I said to him, I said, there's one thing I've noticed about Satanism. He said, what's that? I said, Satan hurts his followers, but Christ loves his followers. Mm-hmm. He said, I hate to admit it, but you're right. And then he said, the principality demon over this city is my personal spirit guide. And I said, I knew what it meant, but I wanted to hear what he said. I said, what's a spirit guide? He said, the spirit guide is my personal demon that guides me and tells me what to do. So he said, I am depressed a lot. And he said, I think I would like to receive Christ because I want to be loved by God, because my spirit guide doesn't like me. I get depressed because it causes problems all the time for me. It gets a kick out of scaring me all hours of the day and night. Mm-hmm. And it'll just come through the wall and frighten me. So I said, okay. So I would tell him the prayer to pray to receive Christ, and he would get along a few words, and demons would attack him, and he would go as close as I can explain it. He would go in a catatonic trance caused by demons, and he would stare into empty space, and he could not hear nor speak nor nothing. He was like paralyzed. So I would have people pray, and every few minutes this thing happened. So it took an hour for him to get through the prayer of salvation, but he finally did, and then we could bind the demons and got rid of them. The funny thing, a few weeks later, I was visiting people in the community, and I visited his father, who was an atheist, and his mother, who was not a Christian. And they were, I can understand why he had become a Satanist. But I tried to witness to his mother, but she seemed to have a blockage. And just then he came in the door to visit her. And I called him by name. I said, come in here. I said, I want you to tell your mother about you accepting Christ. So he did.
Wow.
And she said, you know, I've noticed a difference this last month, that he is a totally different person. I said, well, wouldn't you like to accept Christ like your grown son? She says, you know, I would. So right then she accepted Christ as her Savior.
Wow.
And what was so great is you can tell a person is really saved because they want other people saved.
Uh-huh.
Well, the head warlock over the whole county, he was the warlock over the city. But one of his good friends was the head warlock over the whole county. So I said to him, I said, I want you to talk to the head warlock over the whole county. And I said, I'd like you to bring him to my house. He says, okay. He says, I'll bring him there tonight at 7 o'clock. I said, that'd be great. So that night at 7 o'clock, this guy came there. He had long hair, dressed in black too, and we came in and we just talked casually for a while. And I talked about demons with him. I mean, here's the head warlock over the county, and I'm talking to him about demons. And I said, what's the largest demon you ever saw? He says, largest demon I ever saw was from China. It's called Demigorgon. I said, well, how big is it? He said, it appears as a dragon, and it's as tall as the house.
Wow.
And so we talked about demons, and he said, to summon demons, I don't have to go through rituals or ceremonies. I said, well, what do you do? He said he held his two hands in front of them in the air like he was going to praise the Lord. And he said with a beckoning of his hands, he said, I just called the demon by name. And I said, come here. And he says, the demons immediately come to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked about demons, and so I gave him the plan of salvation, and he said, I don't want to accept Christ right now. He said, but I'll think about it. I says, I appreciate it. So we got up and he started going to my door. And I said, let me just ask you one question before you go. He said, what's that? I said, did you bring the prince demon that you have over the county with you in my house? He says, no. I said, why didn't you? He said, the faith in this house was so great. If I had brought my prince, he called it a prince, into the house. Prince is short for principality, that the Bible says. He said, if I brought my prince into the house, the faith in this house was so great, he would have been immediately sent to the pit. Now, I'd never heard that before, but he knew what he was talking about. He was the head Satanist over the county. So I said, do you mind telling me where your prince demon is? He says, it's over there on the corner underneath the street light. I said, okay. So he drove home, and the whole time he was going home, his prince demon, which is over the whole county.
Hold on, Dr. Bailey.
Okay.
We'll be right back, everyone, for second hour.
Listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on freedomslips.com, and I am honored to be interviewing Dr. Preston Bailey about satanic ritual abuse and the agenda of the New World Order. In this hour, we'll be speaking a little bit more about the details and also what Dr. Bailey has learned in interviewing and counseling some of these individuals, as well as how it ties together with the coming reign of the Antichrist and our being at the end of days. Dr. Bailey, I want to turn it back over to you, allow you to finish up your story. And if you would, can you lead it into also the blood sacrifice and the because the Bible speaks about that as well, and how the elite, they would pass their children through the fire, offer them in sacrifice to Moloch, and
Yes.
that these kind of things are still being perpetuated by these same Illuminati bloodlines, even in this day and age.
Yes, that's true. So to finish that story, the head warlock for the county left my house, and when he drove home, the prince demon over the county got in the car, and the whole way home cursed him out and says, "The blood of Jesus is nothing but urine." And he said, "Don't listen to what that preacher had to say." And that prince demon was so furious with him for talking to me, and even when he got home, he would open the kitchen cabinet to get something to drink, and the demon would appear in the cabinet and curse him out. And everywhere it went, for the next hour, he just cursed him out. And then he was thinking, before he went to bed, he got to thinking, he said, "Now my demon has never been that mad before." And this demon had came to him when he was 5 years old. And his parents were so scared of him, they would not go in his room, his bedroom, at 5 years of age. And they would put crucifixes all down the hall. It's stuff that didn't work. So anyway, he got to thinking, my demon has never been this angry. So that means what that preacher said must have been true. So he prayed and received Christ as his Savior. The next Sunday, he was baptized at the church, and he actually helped me. People that had been involved in Satanism, he helped them get out.
Wow.
And so he taught me exactly what goes on in Satanism. And so that's what happened. So the way I learned what goes on in witchcraft, Satanism, or the Illuminati is I've counseled people and helped them, and then they taught me. So what happens in the Illuminati? They have a human sacrifice on the four. It's called the four high holidays of the year, and they get their child sacrifice from one of two places. Number one, there's a woman in the cult group whose job is called being a breeder. A breeder. That means during a ritual they have multiple sex with her, and then eventually she'll become pregnant, and when the child is born, they will sacrifice this child to Satan. Then they cut out the heart and they pass the heart around, and they're supposed to eat it. So what happens is the body of the person they sacrifice, they dig a deep hole, they throw what's left of the body in there. And one person has the job of pouring gasoline or kerosene on it and lighting it afire. And when it goes out, they pour more gas, and they do it until all the remains of the body is nothing but ashes. That's why they hardly ever find the body. And the only time they would ever find any human remains is if the person who's responsible for destroying the body gets lazy and doesn't do their job. And that's the only time a body is ever found. So, and the second way they get a human sacrifice is they kidnap a child in the community. So they drive along the street. When a child gets off the bus and they've got to walk like a block away to go home, usually it's like a little girl, they kidnap them and they use them in human sacrifice. But in large cities, there's a place where a lot of these children are taken and they're held captive there. So it's really bad. Now, let me say this. There are government officials who have the responsibility of prosecuting people for crimes, and they're in a satanic cult. Many of these cult groups worship, as you mentioned earlier, Moloch, who is the god of child sacrifice. It is a hollow brass image with outstretched arms. They have a fire in the belly. They put the young child on the outstretched arms, and the fire consumes the child and kills it. And that's how they worship Molech. But in most states, there is, at least at the highest level, judges or prosecutors who are part of either a satanic cult or members in the Illuminati, if they are one of the 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati. And these are ancient families that go back to the time of Nimrod in ancient Babylon. You hear people talk about the Illuminati beginning in 1776 with Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria, Germany. That is only the Bavarian Illuminati. That is not the Illuminati. So the 13 bloodlines are from all over the world, 13 major bloodlines that go back to Nimrod. In fact, many times when they draw Nimrod, they draw Baphomet. which is the physical manifestation of Lucifer. So a satanic cult worships Satan. The Illuminati worship Lucifer. That's the difference. That's the technical difference. The Illuminati is 13 bloodlines, and they are involved in high-level programming. So they have programmers that charge a lot of money, and when a child is ritually abused, they do it to create such trauma in the child's mind that an altered personality is created, and then that altered personality is programmed to do a specific job for the cult. And in the Illuminati, that altered personality, as it's called, is programmed to do a job for the New World Order or for the Illuminati. So there's many types of altered personalities that are created and programmed. There is New World Order programs and alters, and they're programmed to carry out the agenda for the New World Order. So they have an international job involving the New World Order to help create a one world government, a one world military, a one world economic system, and a one world government. Now, we know the time is getting close, and I'll tell you how. You're not going to hear this on the evening news. But the last 5 years in the world, there have been hundreds of astronomers or astrophysicists murdered. Now, let me say that again. The last 5 years, all over the world, some of the most famous astronomers or astrophysicists have been murdered. They did not die by accident. It was clear, judged by the police, it was clear that they were brutally murdered by assassins who have never been found to this day. Not one of the assassins in the world who murdered hundreds of these world-famous astronomers and astrophysicists have been murdered. In fact, one van filled with 6 astronomers and astrophysicists, all 6 of them were brutally murdered in that van. Now, that means the van did not crash. They were murdered.
Wow.
In fact, the top astrophysicist in the world, not only was he murdered, but the very next day, his astrophysics laboratory was burned to the ground.
Wow.
And you don't hear about this normally in the news. So evidently, the Illuminati has planned for some big event. Some call it the disclosure, but it's some big event that's probably going to come the next few years, that's going to come from the sky, that there's going to be something that is unusual, and it's going to come from the air. Now, what's interesting is the Roman Catholic Church has out west, on one of the highest mountains in the U.S., they have a telescope called Lucifer.
Right.
And that is an acrostic, which means each letter represents something. It is basically a thermal telescope. So something is going to come in the air to Earth that can be seen on a thermal telescope. Now, most telescopes are not a thermal telescope that sees the heat or energy in something in the air. So something, so the next few years, we need to keep our eyes on the sky, because some big worldwide event is going to occur from the air and is going to come down to Earth.
Wow.
We can speculate on what that is. I'm just telling everybody who listens to your broadcast, that is what is going to happen, because the Illuminati have had it planned for years. And the second group of people that have been murdered by the hundreds, the last 5 years, over 300 bankers have been murdered. And the reason being is the Illuminati has all of their bankers in place around the world, and they're getting ready to have a one world economic system. So the Bretton Woods system, as it exists now in the United States, is going to change with the Federal Reserve System. And there's going to be a new worldwide global economic system that's going to occur probably in the next 10 years. And so because of these two things, we know it's going to happen.
Right. That's one of the things that we have been warning about with regard to the strong delusion and the coming of the Antichrist, because it's clear in Scripture that we have a false Messiah come first, and that they tried to counterfeit what will be the true second coming in order to deceive the world. And that is part of the grand deception that Satan pulls out, kind of his final trump card for leading everybody astray. And because there's no love of the truth, many people are led astray. And so that's one of the, in my opinion, one of the most important things with regard to the study of prophecy, and coming to understand that we are at the end of days, and that all of these things which the Bible warns us about are coming to light. And the amazing thing about your work is that you are hearing confirmation of biblical prophecy from the New World Order elites, as well as the demonic influences that are upon them, the fallen angels who are perpetuating this and setting it up with regard to the New World Order. And so, if you would, can you speak more about that too, Dr. Bailey?
Yes, that is correct. The Bible says, as in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of God be. Well,
yes.
So you have to look what happened in the days of Noah.
Right.
In the days of Noah, there was much immorality and debauchery in the world. And also was Genesis 6.
Yes.
It says that the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they produced giants. The Hebrew word is Nephiim. And what happened is, the Bible in Genesis 6 only discusses in just a few verses what happened. Now, I believe all 66 books in the Bible is the inspired word of God, but
absolutely,
that doesn't mean we are to discard other historical books.
Yes.
I have, at my house, I have over 70,000 books.
Wow.
And I read very fast. As fast as I can turn a page, I can read. And in 20 minutes, I could read a 250-page book. So there's much archaeological evidence about things that happened in history, and there's much historical evidence, which means it's written in history books. I think anybody that wants to know what happened in Genesis 6 when the sons of God came down to earth, if they want to know the details about it, they need to read one of the religious historical books, and that's called the Book of Enoch, Enoch.
Yes, absolutely.
I attended the largest seminary in the world with the greatest theological library in the world, and I'm just telling you, nobody ever told me about the Book of Enoch.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that I've said today, they don't talk about in the seminary. So I had to learn on my own. That's why I have so many books. The real history of the world and how God worked on earth.
Yes.
The Book of Enoch is just a historical book, so don't get uptight about it. It's just a book that amplifies Genesis 6 verses 1 through 4.
Mm.
And it tells this. It gives the name of the sons of God mentioned in Genesis 6, and they're called the Watchers. There's many type of fallen beings recorded in the Bible. One of them are called the evil watchers. And so the Book of Enoch names all 200 fallen watchers. Now, I think that's significant, even though I was never taught that in seminary. I have 2 earned doctor's degrees, and I was never taught that book in any one of those degrees from seminaries.
Wow.
And I'm horrified about that. I'm embarrassed for all the seminaries in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it names the 200 watchers. It names all 200 of them. And it goes into detail. Now, so since I've graduated from seminary, I've studied archaeology around the world, and I came to the startling truth that there have literally been thousands, not hundreds, thousands of bones of giants.
Right.
That 2,000 skeletal remains of giants have actually been sent to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. from the late 1890s to the present. But the director of the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. dogmatically believed in evolution.
Right.
And so therefore, he did not want to rewrite the history books. So he either destroyed those 2,000 bones of giants, or he put them in a packing crate at the back of the warehouse so they could never find them.
Right.
Now, he did a great disservice to the public, and he did a horrible disservice to the history books and the science books. Now, when it comes to evolution, I discovered by actually attending the Smithsonian Institute that there's actually 200 different theories of evolution. And while I was there, I was looking at the skeletal remains of so-called old prehistoric men type creatures, humanoids. And then suddenly the woman that worked at the Institute opened the glass display and took out this one skeletal remains. So I said, ma'am, if you don't mind, why are you taking that out? Here's what she said. She said, we've just discovered that these skeletal remains is not correct, that this was defrauded. The person who claimed he discovered these bones, he actually made them, and this was a total hoax. Now, what do you think of that?
Oh,
That's
wow.
when I was at the Smithsonian Institute. I thought it was hilarious. So I actually counseled one woman in the Illuminati, and here's what she told me one day. She said, about 5 years ago, she said, my house burned, and it affected one part of the house. And Illuminati constructionists came in, and they put these strange things underneath the foundation of the house in that part of the basement. And she said, what that is, she said, Nephilim, when they're created, when they are birthed, which is they take these fallen creatures. TV says it's aliens.
Right. Extraterrestrial.
Yeah, but I say they're, she calls them, she says, cosmic creatures.
Mm.
The Bible calls it fallen, higher ranking angelic creatures.
Right.
So they impregnate women, and 3 months after conception, they come back and they take the fetus out. They put it in a special incubator, and then when it grows very fast. So when it becomes a large size, they come to her basement, and they'll stay for a week. And there's these energy kind of lamps that these Nephilim, to simplify, these Nephilim get underneath them, and it helps them get their strength, and then they leave.
Hmm.
And so they stay there for a week under these special kind of lamps. Now, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. Let me ask you a question along that line as well, Dr. Bailey, because it seems like the abduction phenomena seems to follow some of these elitist bloodlines, and that a lot of them are, they have these hybrid children, and because of certain blood types or whatever, that they are able to interrelate with these demonic beings. And so, do you think that because we know they are demons, fallen
Yes, that's
angels,
right.
they're not
That's
extraterrestrials from
right.
somewhere out there, but they've been here, trapped here with us ever since the beginning of the fall of Satan and all of that. But
Yes, that's right.
anyways, do you think that that's why these bloodlines are monitored, and also because of the generational curses of what their fathers have done, the ritual abuse that they perpetuate upon their children that makes them more apt and targeted for
Yeah.
this kind of thing?
Yeah, you're exactly correct. Uh, uh, there's 13 bloodlines of the Illuminati, 13 families, and the key thing. This is just the way the Illuminati thinks. It's not the way you and I think, but this is the way the Illuminati thinks. That everything is tied up in the bloodline because of ancestral curses and genetic engineering or genetic modification to these bloodlines. And what it does is, as they genetically engineer the DNA and RNA in their bloodlines, they create in their children a person that is easier to dissociate, which also means it is easier to program them to be what is called mind control slaves. And they say everything centers around the blood. And so it's very important who the father and the mother is, because they go into great detail about who can marry whom.
Right. Selective.
They are selective. So therefore, in the Illuminati, their mate is arranged. It's not chosen. So they will mix two bloodlines because they're looking for a specific ability in the children that are born as a result of the combination of those two bloodlines coming together. So there's no great love in the Illuminati marriages. They're just arranged.
Right.
And so that is why, for the man, it's nothing for them to commit adultery or to have sex with a child. And they say to the child, this is for your benefit. And they say, it's best for the common good. That's the kind of way they think, the philosophy.
Right.
They're doing this for the common good. So each person, through the bloodline and the genetic modification, is designed to have very specific skills. So even before the child is born, they know specifically what that child is going to do, what their job will be in the Illuminati, whether they're to be a banker, whether they are to be in charge of submarines for the U.S. military, whether they're to be in charge of submarines for the Russian military. I want to remind people that after World War II, immediately at the end of the war, the Illuminati bloodlines were actually making plans for the Fourth Reich. And they say that the flying equipment, the flying aircraft that the Nazi scientists created was superior to any other country in the world. And so the reason they lost World War II is because of a leadership failure, which refers to Adolf Hitler and his generals. They say that the soldiers did not fail and the scientists did not fail. It was the leadership at the top. Now, in the Russian and the U.S. military, people at the very top in the military are people that are in the Illuminati bloodlines.
Yes. Yes.
So a person that is in the Illuminati, they may not even know that that is their job, because there is what's called an amnesic barrier between that alter that is programmed to do their job for the New World Order, or for the Illuminati, or for the we Christians call him the Antichrist. The Illuminati doesn't call him the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
They look at him as the Messiah.
Right.
The army of Iran in the Middle East, they say that the Praetorian Guard of the military in Iran is the army for the Muslim Messiah, the Mahdi. And Iran says the Muslim Messiah, the Mahdi, is going to return in the air. Now remember, I've already said there's been hundreds of astronomers and astrophysicists who have been murdered because they don't want astronomers looking deep into the sky because something that's going to come. So it will probably be the false Christ, the false Messiah, who Christians call the Antichrist. And that's probably going to be the one who does it. Now, let me also say that in satellites around the earth, there's thousands of them. Around Illuminati satellites, there is holographic equipment attached to the satellites that can actually create a holographic image in space, in the ionosphere, so that when we look at it from Earth, we can see what we would interpret as a Messiah coming to Earth. And it also has attached to it, it has audio, and the scientific explanation for that is technology that is already in existence. It is called voice-to-skull technology.
Right, right.
There's only a few books written that even talk about voice-to-skull technology. One of the people who actually, for the CIA, created voice-to-skull technology was Dr. Robert Duncan. And he was programmed as a child. He was ritually abused. And so he created a lot of these things. And that was his Illuminati job, because of the way his brain was designed, engineered, that he created a lot of this technology. Now, for those who doubt this, they can look at the book. It's called Project Soul Catcher, S-O-U-L, Project Soul Catcher, Volume 2. And anybody who reads it should expect to be shocked, because they'll learn that what I've talked about is not conspiracy theory, but it's a conspiracy fact.
Right.
Right. Many leading politicians around the world, the last 20 years, have talked about the New World Order. So anybody who doesn't believe a New World Order is coming, they need to not be so naive, the New World Order is simply a orders given to the world by this globalist, secretive power elite. Some call it the cabal. And they're going to create an authoritarian one world government that will replace the sovereign nation states that's in America or in Europe. And so they have great details. And if you don't believe it, I urge you to go to the International Denver Airport. I've been there. I went there to Denver a short time after that man went into this theater and brutally killed people that was in the theater. Now, what's interesting, he actually got a scholarship from the National Health Institute. And I was there a short time after the murder. And if you study about mind control programming, you'll see that the man arrested for the theater murders has 100% of the characteristics of a mind control slave, as the Illuminati calls them. But at the Denver airport are these huge murals. And these are the New World Order murals. And if you go look around the airport, you will see in concrete a plaque dedicating that airport, and it is called the New World International Airport. And it has, if you go to where the baggage claim area is one of the large murals, and it is a picture of a Fourth Reich soldier with a gas mask on and a modern advanced machine gun. And there's this row of mothers crying because their baby has been killed and gassed while the city in the background is burning down. Now, that's a horrible picture, but that's at the baggage claim at the Denver International Airport.
Crazy. So crazy.
Truth is stranger than fiction.
Right.
So at the end of World War II, half of the Nazi scientists went to Russia and half of the Nazi scientists came to the United States. Now, during World War II, the organization that later became the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, they declared that Wernher von Braun was the most dangerous man in the world during World War II. At the end of World War II, the CIA, in Operation Paperclip, arranged for Wernher von Braun and several thousand other Nazi scientists to secretly come to the United States. They put Wernher von Braun working on the NASA rockets, and it was Wernher von Braun that helped design and build the rockets that send the U.S. to the moon. And within 10 years, Wernher von Braun became the director of NASA. Now, who would have guessed when the CIA declared Wernher von Braun during World War II as the most dangerous man in the world, that 10 years later he would be the director of NASA in the United States? Now, that's just beyond imagination.
Right.
And I actually lived near Werner von Braun, and as a kid, we drove by his house.
Oh, wow.
And every smart person has their idiosyncrasies. And so Werner von Braun got cement and paved his front yard, and he painted it green.
Oh,
that way he didn't have to cut the grass. But Werner von Braun, a pastor there, I believe of Huntsville, happened to visit his home. He was visiting in the community. He stopped by Werner von Braun's house and actually led him to Christ.
Wow.
And after that, Werner von Braun would take his Bible to work and leave it on his desk and read it every day at NASA. Now, isn't that a wild story?
That is, absolutely.
Now, I actually counsel a woman who has a relative that was a scientist that worked with Werner von Braun, and he said that there's things as far as aircraft that the government does not want to be made public. That's what he said.
Dr. Bailey, I have a question before we get to the end of the show.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you if you thought that there was a distinction as far as bloodline between, for instance, Cain and Seth, and if the bloodlines, the elites themselves, because I know that they believe that, as far as the fallen angels, that they are the children of them, and but do you think that there is a physical progeny of the devil here, and do the elites believe that themselves?
Let me work from the present and go back. I think it's similar.
We got 5 minutes, just so you know.
Okay, the people that I counsel through the years that are in the Illuminati, they say the Antichrist is already alive, and he was made in a test tube, and he was genetically engineered through mixing the DNA, that's found in the blood, the DNA of certain people in history, and it was genetically engineered together, and that is the Antichrist. And that when he's born, and that the Bible says the Antichrist will have no desire for women, and that's what they say about him.
Wow.
So everyone I talk to say that he is alive. And what they did do is there is what is called scientifically the space-time continuum. And because of their scientific advancement, certain people, very specific in the Illuminati, have been able to go back in time along the space-time continuum and get DNA from certain people to create the Antichrist.
Wow. That is amazing. It makes me wonder about even the Iraq War, because the invasion took place right after they had discovered the tomb of Gilgamesh.
That's right.
And he was a giant. And I do believe that, they are trying to get the DNA of these giants as well, for exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. The first thing Special Forces did after the Iraq War is to find the tomb of Gilgamesh, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so they got all of that DNA to create the Antichrist. So he's alive now. And he was genetically engineered to be very intelligent and to be a great speaker.
Right. And to have supernatural abilities, I'm sure.
Yes. So he is what I would call something almost like what's called an introject. An introject is an entity that is placed inside people with SRADID, and it is a combination of different DNA and alters of other people and part demon, and it's programmed to do a certain job inside of people.
Wow.
So that's something close to what the Antichrist is.
Dr. Bailey, we've got just about 2 minutes remaining. I want to give you a chance to give out your website and contact information once more, and also just mention your book. And then if you would, sir, we'd like to invite you back even in a few weeks if you have the availability, so that
Okay, well,
speak more.
Thank you so much. My website that tells about some of these things is spiritualwarfarecenter.com. That's Spiritual Warfare Center, CENTER.com. And I tell a little bit about dissociative identity disorder and spiritual warfare issues. And if they need to contact me, they can do it through bradmovement.com. BRIDEMOVEMENT, bradmovement.com. And if a woman that worked for the Justice Department, one place that I spoke, afterwards she came to me and she said, if the American people knew what was actually going on in the government of the United States of America, they would throw out everybody in Washington, D.C. and start over.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a Christian that worked for the Justice Department.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. I could totally see that. And that would be the only way, really, that, I mean, we need a restart like that. But, of course, it's going to take Christ coming back to redeem and to rectify everything. Because he said, unless the days be shortened, there be no flesh left. But final comment from you, Doctor.
Yeah, I wrote the book Spiritual Warfare, Defeating the Forces of Darkness, which is on Amazon. You can either put in Spiritual Warfare or my name, Dr. Preston Bailey.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. We'll definitely, if you have availability, have you back in a few weeks.
Okay, thank you.
All right. God bless all. Good night.
Good night.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.